Alright, what is going on, everybody? This is a full guide to building an aesthetic physique by yours truly, Nick Vano. Um, this is my first video in a little while, and I figured I wanted to deliver a really quality, solid piece of work for you guys. So we got a little slideshow, and we got a full guide coming to you guys right here. So let's get into it. First of all, who am I? Why should you listen to me? Well, I'm Nick Vano, NAV Vano or Antonius on YouTube. If you didn't see my username when clicking on this video, I love to educate people on how to improve their lives. And I also would say that I built a relatively good physique as shown by these two pictures right here. These were both taken, I think, in like consecutive days or nearly consecutive days about a month ago. So this is a pretty good example of my current physique. This was after I think this was a cardio workout. It was after, and then this was after a chest and back workout, so you can kind of see the pump there. So, I mean, I don't know. You guys can be the judge, but I think I built up a reputable physique in order to teach people how to build their own aesthetic, good quality physique. So, let's hop straight into it. What you will learn in this video, part one, is how to lift for an aesthetic physique. So, how many sets should you be doing? What kind of exercises? What muscles should you primarily target? The things like that, and maybe get into some more nuanced stuff. But it's not going to be anything too crazy. Pretty bare bones stuff we're going to be going over today. Part two is nutrition for aesthetics. So we're going to go into kind of how to manage, how many calories you should be eating, what types of food you should be eating, and just some basic diet tips. Part three is going to be recovery and sleep, so how to optimize your sleep, how to recover well from your workouts, and also how to not make recovery this overarching thing in your life, which I kind of want to get into. I do feel like, especially nowadays, there's so much stuff about sleep and recovery that people tend to get too much anxiety about, to the point where their sleep and their recovery suffers because they're stressed out about sleep and recovery. Kind of a weird situation to be in, but I've been there before, so I might discuss that, I might not later on, just depending on how the video is going and the topics that have been discussed prior. So, part one, how to lift for an aesthetic physique. The first tip I'll give is that 1 to 2 sets to failure, and even sometimes beyond failure, is going to be ideal for most, if not all, of your exercises. For me, I lift 3 days a week, 1 set to failure for each exercise. But failure is legit all out failure. And I did a video, I think it was my last video that was posted, on high intensity training. So if you don't know much about it, go check out that video. It kind of gives you a rundown. There's also plenty more content out there on YouTube and social media and the internet in general on high intensity training, Mike Mentzer, Arthur Jones, all that good stuff. So I run a pretty similar program to that, if not just a regular high intensity training protocol. But that last failure rep is a legit failure rep. Like, I could not do another rep if I literally gave it my all. You know what I mean? And it's not, stopping the set when you feel like stopping or the rep starts slowing down. It's stopping the set when you physically cannot perform another rep. And sometimes even beyond failure. So what that looks like is partial reps, right? Negative reps where you're just lowering the weight really slowly. There's drop sets, there's rest pause sets, where in a rest pause set, you hit failure, you rest for 30 seconds, hit failure, and maybe rest for another 30 seconds and hit failure again. That's pretty intense. So I don't require it for myself, but if I'm feeling it, if I get done And I'm like, you know what? I feel like I can do a drop set or rest pause, or I want to crank out some partials. I will, but failure is the bare minimum requirement on all these sets. And everyone seems to say, and not as much now, I feel like people are kind of waking up to it, but especially back in the day, a couple of years ago, a few years ago, people would say, like, failure is not optimal. They bring up stuff like stimulus to fatigue ratio and all this kind of more nerdy science based jargon that doesn't really have much merit in the real world and actual, when it comes down to actually lifting and actually getting jacked and strong. Um, a lot of those things, they're just theory. So, I noticed that everyone, basically everyone who trains super hard to failure and beyond has a good physique. As long as they are overtraining, as long as they're keeping their recovery and their diet on point, as long as they've been doing it consistently and for a while. Take anyone who's been training, you know, legit hard, 1 to 2 sets to failure, 3 to 4 days a week, good diet, good sleep, right? Doesn't have some kind of like physical impairment where they can't get big. Someone does that for 2 years, they are going to have a good physique. They're going to have an aesthetic physique, especially if they prioritize these muscles right here. So, the upper chest, the side delts, the lats, the abs, the arms, and legs are still good because you don't really want chicken legs. I feel like it doesn't really matter how good your upper body is. If you have chicken legs, you are absolutely fried, bro. Like, there's really no saving that physique if your upper and lower body are super imbalanced and super disproportionate. So, kind of the main point, or the main reason these muscles are important is because they give you the V taper look. And I'm not going to go into a full detailed description about what the V taper is because I'm going to assume that most of you guys kind of know. If you don't, think about the physique of kind of like a V, right? Or an upside down triangle, right? Or a Dorito, something like that, where it's kind of just going in. Maybe I should have put a picture on the screen to demonstrate, but you can kind of envision what I'm saying, right? Like, you have a wide physique. Your shoulder to waist ratio is basically the ideal shoulder to waist ratio for aesthetics is like 1.6. So your shoulder circumference is 1.6 times um, higher than your waist circumference. So think about that width, having a wide physique. And what I don't mean by wide is fat, like chiseled, wide back, big shoulders. In that upper chest, what it does is it gives you kind of that plate of armored chest look, and it widens your chest out more to kind of, I guess you could say, coincide with the lats and the side delts. Abs, abs in terms of aesthetics. I feel like if, flat stomach can suffice for sure, especially like if you're bulking, don't be so anxious or stressed out about having to keep your abs, keep your six pack. A flat stomach will be fine, but at your peak physique, you do want to have abs. Like, that's peak aesthetics right there. Arms, big arms, as long as they aren't like Popeye level arms where they're so much bigger than everything else. Big arms will always complement everything else. And if you don't have big arms, kind of the same situation with legs, but you do have a big upper chest, side delts, and lats, then your physique once again just kind of looks goofy. And I kind of had that problem at a point, and I've since worked on my arms a lot to get it up. As we can even see looking back, this was not always my situation. I would say my arms even still kind of lag behind my upper chest, my side delts, my lats, right? Using this left picture as an example here. but it certainly used to be a lot worse. They used to be really skinny. You can just kind of envision that even in a picture like this or this, where you're flexing and your arms just look atrocious. That's not really what you want. It just looks goofy and it looks imbalanced. So, besides having these muscles, you know, kind of on priority, and don't worry, like, if you only do upper chest work, the rest of your chest will be big. I only do upper chest work, and you can see the rest of my chest is still relatively big, right? Because your upper chest is hard to grow. It's probably the hardest part of your chest to grow. Yet, if you have a big upper chest, it's what actually makes your chest look big. So it's, kind of a rough situation when it comes to chest aesthetics. That's the reality of it. It's the hardest to grow, but it's what actually makes your chest look big. Not to get too sidetracked here, in general, you just want a balanced physique as well. So if these are the only muscles you have and everything else sucks, right? Perfect example is if you have really good lats, if your back is super wide, but your upper back isn't big, right? You don't have any kind of like back thickness or your back isn't very dense. Like when people talk about your back being dense or thick, they're talking about your upper back and your traps or like even your mid back, right? So if your mid back, mid and upper back sucks, but your lats are super wide, once again, you're just gonna look goofy. Or if you're a twig, but you have a six pack, it doesn't matter, right? Like you're still not gonna have an aesthetic physique just because you have abs. I mean, think about the amount of times you've seen people at the pool or in gym class, whatever, and they're super skinny but they have abs. You're not really thinking like, wow, they have an aesthetic physique. You're thinking like, dang, like they're skinny, they need to put muscle on. So everything needs to have balance to it. Another huge thing, another huge pointer here is that the neck and the traps are very underrated, I would say. And once again, excuse me here, I was sick like last week and I still gotta have a cough. It's pretty annoying. But yeah, so the neck and the traps are very underrated, especially I would say the neck. If you have a skinny neck, but you're jacked, think about like winter time, right? You're jacked, but you have a skinny neck. You're wearing long sleeves all the time, hoodies, jackets, right? Um, you're gonna look skinny. And even if you're shirtless and you are jacked and you have a very skinny neck, it's the same thing. You're gonna look very goofy. Your neck also accentuates, and this isn't to get in like the male beauty space of like looks maxing or anything like that, but your neck also does make I guess you could say your facial aesthetics look better as well, right? So if you have I guess you could say, I'm not trying to sound too weird with it, but an attractive face and a skinny neck, you're kind of look like not necessarily the most I can't say this without kind of sounding corny, so just bear with me. Not really the most masculine, you know, like legit dude out there. You're gonna kind of look like a pretty boy. At the end of the day, that's fine if that's your thing. But I think growing a big neck is certainly beneficial for not only your physique but also your facial aesthetics and how people perceive you. Really, I think people with skinny necks, and I'll get into kind of some of the science here with it. Your neck and traps hold a lot of androgen receptors. Your neck, traps, and side delts hold most of your androgen receptors, which is basically the things that bind to testosterone to actually express the testosterone you have. So this is why big neck, big traps, and big shoulders give you that masculine, manly frame. And that's why guys with big shoulders, wide clavicles, whatever, are a lot of times just perceived as more attractive or are more athletic too. That's a pretty common theme. It's because it actually expresses the testosterone you have. And testosterone is the, well, put gently, the male sex hormone. So that's what, gives us our male characteristics. So that's why well developed traps, well developed neck, and side delts are important for a general aesthetic physique because they kind of give you that quote unquote masculine expression, right? And, honestly, I can attest to this personally. Dudes who have like big necks, big traps, big shoulders, right? And they're overall jacked outside of that, it's a little bit intimidating subconsciously, right? It's not like you see a dude with a big neck and you're like, oh my gosh, like he looks so scary. But I think we can all agree that subconsciously it's a little bit intimidating no matter what, right? You just can't really work around that because it's built in to our DNA. It's built into our brain to kind of perceive someone with those big, um, you know, neck traps, delts to be a better fighter. Um, have more testosterone in general. So I apologize for the little tangent, but that's good to learn anyway. That's good info, and that's a big reason why the V taper is biologically an attractive, aesthetic, athletic physique, and that's the reason why the V taper is the most aesthetic physique is because it expresses the width and the androgen receptor expression. And I could be wrong here. I'm not like a scientist or whatever, but that's what I've learned. That's kind of what I know, or at least how I perceive a lot of that science. So anyway, so we already went over sets. We went over the good muscles. So prioritize in terms of reps. Just go with the basic standard 6 to 12 reps per exercise, right? If you're doing a set to failure and you only hit 4 reps, it's fine. It's not the end of the world. Um, Also, if you are doing a set to failure and you hit 14, 15 reps, you chose too light of a weight, it's once again not the end of the world. But 6 to 12 is a really good general gauge for how many reps, you should be doing. It's kind of one of those situations where, think about school. Your goal is to have straight A's, but if you have a B or two, depending on how good of a student you are, let's say you have your goal is straight A's, but you end up getting, straight B's. It's not the end of the world. It's still fine for most people, right? But the reason you set having straight A's as a goal is because it's a good general gauge, it's a good general goal to have so that, even if you fall short, you'll still end up having good grades. It's kind of like this with the 6 to 12 reps. It's not some golden number. Rather, it's good to approach a set with a weight that most likely is going to give you 6 to 12 reps because you're not going to go way too heavy or way too light to the point where the set really doesn't do anything. It could be potentially dangerous, too dangerous of a weight if you don't expect it to be so heavy, in terms of low reps, and you only get 1 to 2 reps, and you're not really actually going to get much hypertrophy out of that. Or it's way too light, and it's like 20 to 25 reps, and you're kind of just going through the motions, or, the set takes too long, and it's just a waste of time, right? So that's why 6 to 12 reps is ideal for hypertrophy. It's not a magic number, but it's a really good general indicator of how many reps you want to be doing. This is maybe a more controversial one. 3 to 4 days a week lifting is probably actually going to be better for you as a natural lifter rather than, 5, 6, even 7 days a week lifting. I know some naturals who literally lift every single day. And what do they have to show for it? Nothing, right? Or, these guys will lift 7 days a week and they'll have the same physique as someone who lifts 3 days a week, but lifts hard and lifts with intent on those 3 days and recovers well. And he's in the gym a lot less, at least uh, half, less than half the time that Mr. 7 days a week is in the gym. And he has an equal physique as him, if not a better physique. 6 days a week, it's going to be the same thing, right? If you're doing push pull legs 6 days a week, you're probably not going to be able to go in every single time in the gym and absolutely smash the weights at hand. If you do, and I can give a personal, kind of anecdote to this, you're going to burn out. Last year, I remember it was like winter time, and I didn't really have much going on. I was also just kind of, you could really say down, not like down in the dumps, but it's winter time. I always get kind of a seasonal depression. That's just how I am every winter. And so I didn't have much going on, so I would just kind of put all my, anger, whatever, into my lifts, right? And you can imagine kind of, and you guys can probably attest to this too, some of you watching this, those lifts are always brutal. And at the end of the day, your central nervous system will feel it as well. And I was lifting every single day, 6 to 7 days a week, and I did it for about a month straight. And I was making good gains at first, right? Actually, like for the first 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, I was like, oh my gosh, like I've never actually seen significant gains in that little spurt of time. But then, right, reality set in, and by about a month in, I completely crashed. I remember it was this one day I got home from school. It was a Monday, and a couple days before I had PR'd, like squat, bench, deadlift, and lifted on top of that. And I came back from school on Monday planning to lift, and I remember, I'm not one who takes naps a lot unless I'm really busy or got like an atrocious night's sleep. And I remember being so dead, I went and took a nap. Especially back then, I was not a big napper. I kind of have become more of one now, as I'm getting more into the teenage years and growing and developing more. But yeah, back then, even a year ago, I wasn't big on it. I took a nap. I got out of the nap and I felt terrible. I felt sick. I felt unbelievably tired. And it was just like, I'm overtrained. My nervous system cannot take that. And so I'd say 3 to 4 days a week with those 1 to 2 sets of failure per exercise on like a push pull legs, upper lower split. That's going to be, where it's at for naturals. That's going to be what you can consistently stick to and you won't burn out doing that. Another big tip is, oh, shoot, my bad. Start with the weakest muscles first. So if you're doing a push day, chest, shoulders, triceps, your shoulders, I always personally do arms last because those are isolation movements. Say your shoulders are weaker than your chest, do shoulders first, then train chest. Um, or back and biceps. Say your upper back, your back thickness is worse than your back width. Do the back thickness movements, then do your pull-ups, your pullovers, pull downs, things like that, right? For the lats, for the back width, because like I said before, balance and symmetry of the physique is going to always trump a physique that is imbalanced, but you have a crazy huge upper chest, a crazy huge side delts, but everything else sucks, right? So start with those weakest muscles first and strongest last, worst to best. Also, keep in mind compound movements are your biggest bang for your buck lifts. So, going back to that push day example, if I'm starting with shoulders first, I'm going to do overhead press first, or behind the neck press first, or upright rows for the shoulders, right? That's what you want because those are your biggest bang for your buck lifts. You want to do those first because you're fresh, you're not fatigued, and you can do the heaviest weight for the heaviest lifts. That's why I do arms, last pretty much no matter what, unless they're super weak muscle. You know, I remember there was a point where my biceps, my triceps were very lagging behind, and I trained those first in the workout. But for the most part now, I just do compound lifts for the weakest muscle, then go to my second weakest, then go to the arms, whatever, something like that. That's a little tidbit for y'all. So, if once again the push day, your shoulders are lagging behind your chest, do shoulders first for 2 to 3 months, and you will see a significant improvement because you're fresh and you're training that muscle fresh, and that's going to be where the gains are made. Your best gains are made, at least. Now we're going to get into nutrition. Recovery will be next up, but the nutrition aspect is really important. I don't think, I think it was Vince Gironda. He was an old school bodybuilder and trainer. He trained Arnold, Larry Scott, all those old school golden era guys. And he said something that like diet is 80% of your gains. It was like 80 or 90%, something like that. I disagree with that, but diet is still important. It's still a huge factor, and it should be treated with respect with regards to building an aesthetic physique. First tip is that one ingredient foods are always going to be superior. So think about like eggs. The only ingredient in eggs is eggs. Honey, the only ingredient in honey is honey. Um, Potato, it's just a potato, right? That's what you want. I'm not like a strict carnivore or a paleo or a keto. I am a one ingredient type of guy. I'm not to say, this isn't to say that you can't eat foods that have multiple ingredients. I have oats, I have peanut butter, um, cheese, and they usually have multiple ingredients, but try and eat foods that at least have minimal ingredients. And one ingredient foods are always going to be the superior and the priority in your diet. That's like the compound movements of your diet is one ingredient foods. Don't use the excuse of like, I'm bulking, bro, to eat terribly. That is a lame excuse for just eating like crap, right? People will say like, yeah, I'm just bulking, and they're eating donuts, they're stuffing their face with all this crap, and you perform worse in the gym. Not only that, but you could actually be eating the same amount of calories with healthy food, right? And this is the big thing I always say. For most people, bulking with healthy food is not going to be a fun excursion. It's going to kind of suck. Um, People will gladly stuff down 4 donuts, but what about eating, cashews and eggs and, nut butter with to achieve the same amount of calories? It's gonna kind of suck. It's gonna be a little bit of a struggle, but you can get the same amount of calories. You'll perform better in lifts. You'll have higher testosterone. You'll be able to work sharper, and it'll overall just improve you so much that the ROI of like, oh, but it's hard to bulk while eating healthy, it's so good that it's just a terrible excuse. It is. Um, Fasting is good even when bulking. Um, I made a video. Shoot, my bad. We'll get to that. I'll explain in a second what's going on there. Anyway, fasts are good even when bulking. So, 24-hour fast once a week, once every 2 weeks when bulking, that's fine, right? If you need to eat 2,800 calories a day to be in like a 200 calorie surplus, and one of the days per week you're doing a full fast, well then what's 2,800 times 7? That's like 19,600, if I'm not mistaken. Well, then just in 6 days a week, you can eat like 3,200 calories or something like that. Or you can have a cheat day where you eat like 3,500, 4,000, something like that. I would say when bulking, fast less, but it's going to be good. It's beneficial for cleaning out, kind of just your insides, you could say. I don't know all the science behind it. Once again, I'm not a biologist. I might make a separate video and do some research into fasting, but I found it to be good once or twice a month. Right now, I'm bulking, but even then, I'm fine. I eat a really big dinner on the fast days, because it's from dinner time the day before to dinner time then. It's 24 hours, basically, give or take like an hour. And yeah, I still find it to be good to do. And when cutting, I think, especially if you're going on, pretty crazy cut, say you're like excessively fat, one meal a day, maybe make it a big meal, but still, one meal a day, you're gonna lose weight. So make sure it's healthy, make sure it's big, so you don't get so you don't get too starved. But yeah, that's gonna be good no matter what. Use a calorie calculator. There's plenty of them. They're gonna give you a little survey about what your weight is, your age, your height, your gender, how much activity you do. Do you want to bulk, gain weight? Do you want to cut and lose weight or maintain? And they're going to tell you how many calories you should be eating and just base your diet on that. Eat for your goals. So, for example, are you cutting or are you bulking, right? Are you in a calorie deficit? Should you be eating less than your maintenance calories or should you be eating more than your maintenance calories? You'll find that out on the calorie calculator, what you should be doing with that. Just look up on Google like calorie calculator and you'll find out how much you should be eating roughly and, tweak it for your goals. If you don't want to gain a pound a week and you want to gain like half a pound, you can do the math yourself. It's nothing crazy. It's not rocket science. Also, don't get obsessed with calorie counting, or calorie calculating, I guess you could say that too. Um, People really tend to make it a big deal and they get super hyper fixated on it when it's like, I mean, dude, in reality, even if you're counting everything down to the last microgram, you're still going to be a little bit off. And as you get more into training, you will also be able to kind of feel out how much you should be eating. So don't worry too much about that. That'll come with time, just your intuition. But it's still good to have a general gauge on how much you should be eating and calculating, with making your meal plan, the foods you're eating, all the stuff like that. That's going to be good. It's going to be beneficial. People who say, like, don't calorie count at all, it's just as annoying as the people who say, like, you should, count everything down to the last gram. It's, two sides of the same coin, basically. This is just what I found. Steak, eggs, fruit, and nuts are really going to be those premier level foods in your diet, whether you're cutting or bulking, but really, especially if you're bulking. For me, I found steak, eggs, fruit, especially like bananas, the higher calorie, starchy fruits. Dude, those are going to be incredible because those are healthy, those are clean, they're high calorie, they're bang for your buck. For the cutting, chicken breasts, maybe. I'd still eat these foods though because they're fatty and those are good for testosterone production. Just eat more or less of them based on your goals, right? And then for pre and post workout, this is kind of what I always go with. I haven't really been having protein powder or protein shakes that much lately. Maybe I'll get back on that, maybe I won't. But this is pretty good. Kind of a sample template pre and post workout meal, and you can tweak as necessary. For a pre workout meal, you want fast digesting carbs, but you still want it to be healthy. Like, I know people have like Sour Patch Kids for pre workout. That's a little absurd. Um, For me, because I did powerlifting this year, and I did two different meets. I did a regional meet, and then I went to state, so I had a state meet. And both of those meets, I did have like Sour Patch Kids or some kind of candy before, because like that was the big, meat day. So you want to get those fast digesting carbs in immediately. But for a normal lift, bro, that's not necessary. It's kind of like just a cope to eat terribly, right? And so honey and a banana will suffice. Like, you don't need to have a bag of Sour Patch Kids and a handful of Skittles. That's just a cope. For a post workout meal, you still want fast digesting carbs to replenish the glycogen you lost throughout the workout. And you also want some type of protein, just to elicit recovery. And I feel like it's just kind of the signature thing to do. Just have a protein shake after a workout. It's just kind of tough. So, like, just do it because it's tough, honestly. I'm not going to get into all the science. Like, bro, post workout protein shake, you just feel like a gym bro. Like, you feel like you really achieved the gym bro aesthetic and ideal. It's just tough to do. So, run it. Um, yeah, that's what I would say for a post workout meal: honey, protein powder, maybe something else if you're bulking, right? Meal frequency, people will obsess over like meal timing and muscle protein synthesis and all this kind of BS. It's a complete psyop, dude. I think pre and post workout meals are good because those are going to fuel you for your workout, and they're also going to allow you to recover afterwards. But in terms of like, should I have 6 or 4 meals a day? Or, oh my gosh, you'll be fine. I would actually lean towards, you know, 2 to 3 big meals a day, then a pre and post workout. That's probably going to be good for most people, and that'll probably suffice. That'll be something you can maintain consistently. I know my history teacher, he's older now, and he's a hockey coach for our school. I love him. I'm not gonna name drop, but he's a go. But he used to do bodybuilding shows, and he was saying like, oh yeah, I would wake up at 3 a.m. and I would eat. I had to get protein in for the meal frequency and protein synthesis, and it's just kind of like, that's kind of stupid. And I'm not saying I didn't say that to him, but I was kind of thinking that. And bless his heart, dude's jacked, but I think he's jacked in spite of doing that. Because if you're waking up at 3 a.m. as a teacher too, you got to be in school early. You're sacrificing. Because you think about this, your alarm goes off at 3, interrupting your deep or REM sleep or whatever. Then you go eat, and then you get to go back to bed. And who knows how long it's going to take you to fall back asleep. And your body's also digesting food while sleeping. And so you're sacrificing sleep quality and potentially quantity to, wake up in the middle of the night and eat. That's kind of dumb. And that's going to go into our next slide, which is recovering sleep tips. This is a picture of me a few months back. I was pretty ill. I had a pretty bad case of the flu. And I don't know, I just want to use this picture. I thought it was funny. I don't know, bro. And but yeah, I had the flu in this picture, and this is me after a little nap. So I figured this is good, in terms of recovery. There's my brother in the background. But yeah, good picture to exemplify recovery and sleep, things like that. I was recovering from my illness. So this is kind of maybe a less or more unknown thing, but a consistent sleep schedule is probably going to be the most important thing for recovery. So going to bed, you know, at the same time every night and waking up at the same time every day without an alarm, and your body will just adapt to that, is more important than even your total amount of sleep. Now, this isn't to say that you shouldn't be getting 7 to 9 hours, but if you're getting 9 hours a night, but your sleep schedule changes by an hour or two, like every 2 days or every 3 days, that's terrible, dude. It's terrible for recovery. Your circadian rhythm is not aligned at all. So a consistent sleep schedule is going to be the most important practice. For me, even just last night, dude, like genuinely could not fall asleep till like 1:30. By 11, I think it was like 11, the lights were out, and at 1:30, I finally fell asleep. And I woke up at 10 because I don't have school today. But so I got 8.5 hours of sleep, but like I still feel a little more tired and a little bit more run down. And I can only imagine how it is for people who do this like every night. Like for me, it's one night. It's not the end of the world. I'm still functioning and thriving. To be completely fair with you guys, but doing this every night, oh, it'd be atrocious. I couldn't even imagine. Um, you want to have a dark and a cold room. Oh, oh, uh, sneak peek. You caught me. You want to have a dark and a cold room as you're, in your sleep environment. Have some white noise like a fan or white noise maker. I wouldn't recommend your phone just because like the EMF radiation from your phone like blasting to your head every like for 8 hours every night. It's just not ideal long term for health. And I could do a whole separate video on that. Um, it's like a fan or white noise maker. That's gonna be good. A hot shower before bed, that works wonders because once you step out of the shower, your body temp goes down, and to enter deep sleep, your body temperature needs to go down by like 2 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's big time stuff right there. Prayer, breath work, and reading before bed. That's pristine. Calms you down, de-stresses you, keeps you safe through the night with prayer, right? Ask God for protection throughout the night. That's good. Nice little safety net. Limiting your light exposure. Just don't be on your phone an hour or two before bed. Dim your house an hour before bed. Kind of sucks because I go to bed earlier than anyone in my family most nights, and so everyone's kind of up. So like I can't really just like turn all the lights off in the house. But I do know that when I grow into an older man, a more elderly individual, and I'm in my own crib, an hour or two before bed, the lights are going off. Might have a couple candles up, because I've even done it here where the lights will be basically completely off, and we might just have the TV or a lamp running, right? And an hour before bed, do that. You feel so much better. Your sleep is so much better. You're so much more tired. You're so much more apt to go to sleep. So that's a huge one. If you can do that, do it. I try and do it to the best of my ability, yet, you know, I fall short most nights, unfortunately. Um, but yeah, and another thing too is like stretch, a few days a week, get some good stretching in, get sunlight, um, cold showers, it depends. They're not terrible, but I think they're pretty overhyped in case anyone kind of asks about that. Um, and don't lift super, super frequently. That's also going to impact your recovery. And actually, if you overtrain, your sleep is going to suffer because your nervous system is always on it. So that's a huge one to keep in mind. And yeah, that's basically going to do it. Thanks for watching. God bless. As always, God bless. Well, hopefully you guys got something out of this video, truly. Hopefully it was good. You learned a couple things. It wasn't just me going through the motions. I actually got kind of into it and introspective, you could say, with the tips and the guidelines. And yeah, hopefully you guys got something out of it. As always, God bless.